Hello, my name is Doug and welcome to this ICE assembly. Today we're going to be thinking about refugees and loving your neighbour. So, start with an activity. I want to imagine that you're at home and then suddenly your parent bursts through the door and says there's an invading army coming and we need to leave in 5 minutes. You can't carry everything, so write down your top 5 things that you're going to bring. Remember, it can't be that heavy too because you're going to have to carry this. I'll give you 1 minute to write down your list and then a few minutes to share it with the class. Okay, so you should have your list. Why don't you share it with the class? So I had to think through this activity as well and made a list of all the things you could possibly bring. I wonder how many you got, maybe something you missed. You always miss something in that game. You always wish you'd taken something, and it's always a hard decision to make. Now this is a fun little game to play, but it's a sad reality for millions of people all over the world. Today, there are 27.1 million refugees in the world. Now that's a huge number. And when we think about big numbers, it's very hard to comprehend how big that really is. But if you were to count all those refugees in one go, if you went 1, 2, 3, 4, had them all in a line, it would take you over a year to count all of them. That's how many refugees there are currently in the world. And that doesn't include those who are internally displaced. Those are people who have fled for the same reasons as a refugee, but they haven't left their home country. They're still there. And there are 89.3 million people in that situation in the world right now. Most refugees come from 6 countries: Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Myanmar. There are so many people in this world without home. So many people who have been forced to flee their homes for some reason. But why? What motivates someone to give up everything and flee their home? Why do people become refugees? There are many reasons that people become refugees, but ultimately it's because they believe their home is no longer safe. But what else do we know about refugees? Well, here are 4 statements of commonly held beliefs about refugees. I wonder how many you think are true or false. Statement number 1. Most refugees flee to rich countries like the USA, Europe, or Australia. That is false. 80% of refugees in the world live in a country neighbouring their own. What about statement number 2? Most refugees live in refugee camps. That is also false. 61% of refugees live in urban areas. Statement number 3. Refugees leave their homes to find better jobs. False. That's a migrant. A migrant may leave their home to find a better future, but they'll usually have some stability in their home in which to build from. A refugee, on the other hand, has fled their home. Statement number 4. Refugees get free education wherever they go. That is also false. Most don't. Across the globe, 84% of children have access to secondary education, whereas only 23% of refugees do. Refugees don't leave their homes for no reason, or to find a better job. They leave because they feel they must. They leave to flee persecution, or war, or famine, or drought, or an environmental disaster. But refugee crises, like we have today, are nothing new. One of the most famous refugee stories from history is that of the Kindertransport. Just before the start of World War II, as Hitler was expanding over Europe, and the persecution of Jews in Germany and German-occupied areas was intensifying, there was an organised effort by the British government to rescue Jewish children and bring them to safety in the UK. Children were brought out of Germany, sometimes through borders and sometimes smuggled out, into neighbouring countries before put on boats towards the UK. The first boat, with 198 unaccompanied children, arrived in December 1938. And the last children to be rescued were 74 children from an orphanage in the Netherlands the day before the German occupation in 1940. In total, over 10,000 children were rescued and brought to safety in the United Kingdom, safe from the horrors of the Holocaust. But amazingly, this policy was not entirely popular by people in the United Kingdom. They were often looked down on and accused of being Nazi spies. And even the Daily Mail in 1938 wrote an article on how German Jews were pouring into this country and it had to stop. I find it hard to believe that people could have acted that way. But actually, when we look at the world today, we're not much better. Britain is the 6th richest country in the world, and yet we only host 136,000 refugees. That is less than 0.0005% of the refugees who need help in this world. But for those that we do welcome, do you think we're good at it? Do you think Britain is good at welcoming refugees? There's another famous story I want to share with you. It's a story about caring for those who are different to us.
A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, a foreigner, as he travelled, came to where the man was, and he saw him and took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And then he took the man to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return I will reimburse you with extra expense that you may have."
This story comes from the Bible. It's called the Parable of the Good Samaritan and can be found in the book of Luke in chapter 10. And in that narrative, Jesus is talking about how to show love to the people around us. It's summarised in this phrase, love your neighbour. Neighbour. That's an odd phrase to use. Like, it's easy to love your friends or people who show love to you. But neighbour, that implies the people who live next door, or the people we sit next to in class, people we get on the bus with. Literally the people around us. That's who Christians believe that Jesus says it's important to show love to. But Christians also believe it's important to look out for vulnerable people, like refugees. In another part of the Bible it says, "Do not oppress a foreigner." In another place it says, "Look after those who are different in your land." So what are you going to take away from this? You might not know any refugees, but you may well know someone who doesn't feel at home right now, or someone who's struggling. That might be someone you like, or is someone that's simply your neighbour. How could you show them love?